Part 48. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuchi. Chapter 471. In the lobby of Tongda Pawn Shop. What the hell? Looking at Zhang Fengjai and Sulixu turning around and leaving the pawn shop lobby, Hu Zikan sneered with disdain and turned around to return to the office. Pa. But at this moment, on the booth on the east side of the hall, a Qing dynasty python porcelain plate worth 68,000 yuan suddenly fell from the booth and fell on the marble floor, and was instantly broken into pieces. With the wealth accumulated by Hu Zikan over the years, a leisure and entertainment consumption is more than 100,000 yuan, and a mere python porcelain plate worth less than 70,000 yuan is just a drop in the bucket. But his selfish character made him flash a look of heartache in his eyes, frowned and walked to the booth, and then scolded a little girl who was responsible for arranging the exhibits on the booth. How do you do things? Don't you know that these exhibits are priceless treasures? Even if you are sold, it is not enough to compensate for one exhibit. Faced with Hu Zikan's unreasonable scolding, the pretty girl quickly shook her head and explained. Mr. Hu, there is at least 2 meters between me and the booth. The broken python porcelain plate has nothing to do with me. If according to your explanation just now, when no one touched the booth, the python porcelain plate fell and broke. Did it choose to jump off the platform to commit suicide? Or is there a ghost in our pawn shop? Hu Zikan, whose face suddenly darkened, asked with suppressed anger. This. Faced with Hu Zikan's harsh questioning, the pretty girl suddenly didn't know how to answer and refute. Ziyawai, immediately notify Li Jinwen in the finance department and ask her to deduct 2/3 of Zhang Yunfang's salary every month until she completely pays off all the losses of the python porcelain plate. Zhang Yunfang's speechlessness calmed Hu Zikan's anger a little, but the loss of the python porcelain plate made him feel very distressed, and he finally made a way to make up for his losses. In addition, notify Wang, the lawyer of Shunda law firm, and ask him to be ready to sue Zhang Yunfang at any time to prevent Zhang Yunfang from resigning and evading debts. After hearing Hu Zikan's punishment method, Zhang Yunfang's face turned pale as paper and fell to the ground, and then drops of crystal clear tears began to fall from her eyes. After all, for a rural girl who earns less than 3,000 yuan a month and needs to rent a house and live, the compensation of nearly 70,000 yuan is simply a sky-high price. This is equivalent to her working for the pawn shop for free for 3 years while tightening her belt. Pa. Ignoring Zhang Yunfang's tears, Hu Zikan turned around and planned to return to the office. A Song Dynasty official kill porcelain bottle and a Ming Dynasty famille rose porcelain on the exhibition stand fell off the exhibition stand like a Qing Dynasty python porcelain plate, and then were broken into countless pieces. Although the 2 pieces of porcelain were just counterfeits, the exquisite patterns and the realistic imitation technology also made their market value exceed the python porcelain plate. Otherwise, Hu Zikan would not have been able to put them on the exhibition stand to attract customers. At this time, Zhang Yunfang, who was sitting on the marble floor, was more than 2 meters away from the exhibition stand, completely getting rid of the suspicion of work mistakes. At this moment, facing the 2 pieces of porcelain that fell off the exhibition stand inexplicably, Hu Zikan had a vague premonition that something was wrong. He felt that the 3 pieces of porcelain that were inexplicably broken might just be the beginning of a disaster. At this moment, a beautiful mobile phone ringtone suddenly rang in his pants pocket. The sky is blue and waiting for the rain, and I am waiting for you. The smoke from the cooking rises up, thousands of miles across the river. The calligraphy on the bottom of the bottle imitates the elegance of the previous dynasty, just take it as a foreshadowing for me to meet you. He took out his mobile phone and took a look. After seeing the number displayed on the screen, it was a very important sponsor. Hu Zikan took a deep breath to adjust his mood, and then answered the call with a flattering smile on his face. But when the call was just connected, Hu Zikan had no time to speak, and an angry scolding came from the phone immediately. Hu Zikan, you dare to use 3 counterfeit fakes to deceive me, Do you think I am easy to bully, and you plan to ride on my neck and piss? Seventh Master, even if Zikan is brave enough, he dare not deceive you. When he heard the angry scolding coming from the phone, Zikan, whose face changed slightly, hurriedly explained in a humble voice. When Zikan sent the 3 antiques to your house, you personally approved them, and Zikan, I don't want to hear any explanation from you now. The man called Chiya interrupted Zikan's explanation and ordered in a gloomy tone. The 3 antiques were reserved by an old senior of the Chamber of Commerce, and half of the fees have been paid in advance. According to the customary rules of our Chamber of Commerce, no matter which party breaches the contract, it must pay 10 times the compensation to compensate the injured party afterwards. According to the price you sold me the 3 antiques, you now need to pay 180 million yuan in compensation. At the same time, you also need to pay me 20 million yuan for worry and mental damage. Zikan, if I don't see an extra 2 and 8 zeros in our trading account in 2 hours, you know what the consequences will be. Then, the other party did not give Zikan any chance to explain or ask for help, and hung up the phone directly. Impossible, with my years of trained eyesight, how could I not be able to tell the difference between the genuine and fake works from the Ming and Qing dynasties? Listening to the beeping sound from the phone, Zikan muttered to himself with disbelief in his eyes. Master, are you okay? Seeing Zikan standing there with a dazed look, Ding Hui couldn't help but ask with concern. Ding Hui's questioning voice made Zikan wake up from his incredible confusion. Then, he thought of the naked threat of Chiya and the fear of the Chamber of Commerce behind Chiya, and quickly found a phone number on his phone and called it. Minling, use the money I deposited in Kaiki Bank to transfer 200 million to Chiya of the Liuhe Chamber of Commerce in the provincial capital as quickly as possible. After hanging up the phone, Zikan felt his heart bleeding. Although the business of antique calligraphy and painting belongs to the highly profitable industry, with the tradition of not opening for 3 years and making a living for 3 years after opening, but limited by the influence of the source of goods and connections, the wealth he has accumulated over the years is not as much as the outside world has rumored. The 200 million yuan in compensation had already broken his bones. Just as Zikan was feeling sorry for the huge compensation, his cell phone rang again with a beautiful and melodious ringtone. The sky is blue and waiting for the rain, and I am waiting for you. The smoke from the cooking rises, thousands of miles across the river. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 472. In the lobby of Tongda Pawn Shop. When Zikan saw the number displayed on the screen of his mobile phone, which was the deputy general manager of the pawn shop and his cousin Ziwa, he had a vague feeling that something had happened, and he answered the phone without any delay. Brother, the 5 pieces of antique porcelain that we took to the provincial capital for the exhibition were inexplicably broken just 5 minutes ago. When Ziwa introduced on the phone, Zikan's face changed slightly, and he took a few deep breaths to force himself to calm down, and then closed his eyes to think for a while. The time for thinking was not very long, only about 5 seconds, and Zikan, who opened his eyes again, asked. Ziwa, have you called the police to investigate the cause of the porcelain breakage? Have you claimed the loss from the organizer and the insurance company? Brother, the cultural relics exhibition in the provincial capital ended 2 hours ago. The 5 pieces of antique porcelain were broken during our return journey. Not only did it have nothing to do with the organizer, but it also exceeded the time for the insurance company to claim compensation. After hearing Ziwa's explanation, Zikan's face turned pale instantly, and his body began to tremble slightly. Since he wanted to promote the reputation of the pawn shop through the exhibition, the 5 pieces of porcelain used for the exhibition were not only genuine, but also priceless antiques. According to the current market price of the auction house, the value of the 5 pieces of antique porcelain was at least nearly 300 million yuan, which he bought from others with his savings over the years. If the 200 million yuan in compensation to the seventh master is included, he lost nearly 500 million yuan in just a few minutes, and his heart was already bleeding. When he thought of the 5 pieces of antique porcelain in the transportation process, which were broken inexplicably and strangely like the 3 pieces of antique porcelain on the exhibition stand in the hall, the words Zhang Fengjai said when he left the hall suddenly came to his mind. 10 years ago, when he knelt at the door of the Zhang family and asked to become a disciple, he was already a middle-aged man of nearly 40 years old, and he had experienced all kinds of hardships and struggles in society, which made his vision and knowledge far better than those villagers in Zhangchuang. Whether it was the fortune-telling of Zhang Jinyu, the third son of the Zhang family, or the exorcism of Zhang Fengjai, who was only 8 years old, in his opinion, they were all tricks and activities that promoted feudal superstition. Therefore, he never believed in them as firmly as the villagers in Zhangchuang, which was also the reason for his courage to betray his master. Now, when he encountered 3 incredible troubles in succession, he vaguely felt that Zhang Jinyu's fortune-telling and Zhang Fengjai's exorcism did not seem to be feudal superstition. And the disaster he encountered now seemed to be imprinting the prophecy when Zhang Fengjai left step by step. The sky is blue and waiting for the rain, and I am waiting for you. The smoke from the cooking rises, thousands of miles across the river. Just when Hu Zikan was considering whether he should take the initiative to apologize to Zhang Fengjai, give in, and then let the other party find a way to resolve his troubles, the phone rang again, seemingly beautiful and moving, but in fact it had already frightened him. When he saw the number displayed on the phone screen, which was from his confidant who was helping him secretly deal with some special antiques and calligraphy and paintings, Hu Zikan quickened his pace and walked to the corner of the hall to answer the phone. "Boss, something big has happened." When he heard the panicked voice of his confidant on the phone, Hu Zikan suddenly felt that not only did his breathing begin to slow down, but his heart seemed to have stopped beating. The confidant, who could not see the boss's reaction through the phone, continued to speak in a panic. "Boss, just 5 minutes ago, the police suddenly surrounded our residence. Zhuazi, Linzi, Gozi and the batch of treasures that had just been unearthed were all taken away by the police. I went to Yulin to relieve myself because my stomach was not feeling well, and I was lucky to escape." The suffocating feeling that came instantly made Hu Zikan fall directly to the ground with weakness all over his body. His pale face was like white paper, and his eyes showed a look of fear. If you want to get rich overnight and continue to get rich in the antique world, you either rely on picking up leaks or relying on unorthodox methods. Picking up leaks, picking up is vision, leaking is luck. For such a fortune that depends entirely on luck, if you can encounter it once in your life, it is the explosion of your character. If you can encounter it twice in your life, it is the blessing accumulated in your previous life, and if you can encounter it 3 times in your life, it is the green smoke from your ancestors. Side door and left path. Side refers to the tomb door, and left refers to adventure. Although such a fortune that relies on side door and left path can achieve continuous wealth, it is a violation of national laws at the risk of being beheaded. For Hu Zikan, who is determined to be a superior person, he wants to achieve overnight wealth through picking up leaks, and he wants to achieve continuous wealth through side door and left path. Therefore, as early as 5 years ago, he secretly formed a very professional tomb robbing team to dig up the tombs of historical celebrities and dig up the tombs of dignitaries everywhere. This is also an important reason why he can accumulate more than 1 billion in just a few years. Professional team, sufficient funds, and the records of tombs in different periods in Taoist temple classics have allowed him to dig at least more than 30 tombs of different dynasties in 5 years. At the same time, Lin Ziyi, who was arrested by the police, was not only too cowardly to withstand any interrogation, but was also the only person who participated in all the tomb robbing operations. If the sentencing for tomb robbing is based on Chinese law, the crimes committed through tomb robbing in 5 years are enough to shoot him 10 or 20 times. "Master, are you okay?" Seeing Huziken sitting on the ground with a pale face, Ding Hui hurried to his side, stretched out her hand to help him stand up, and greeted him with concern. Ding Hui's greeting gradually made Huziken sober up from the horror. Thinking of Zhang Fenjai's words when he left the pawn shop, he would watch how he was going to destruction step by step in the car, and the hope that suddenly emerged in his heart made Huziken immediately shake off Ding Hui's jade hand holding his arm, and then rushed out of the hall like a madman. When he saw Zhang Fenjai sitting in the back seat of the pickup truck, Huziken rushed to the car window, and then with a flattering smile on his face, he saluted respectfully. Ziken greets the senior brother. Although the second conflict between the bar and the flour mill allowed Sulixiu to witness Zhang Fenjai's perfect physiognomy and invulnerable body, she was still puzzled by the method of cutting off the so-called cause and effect relationship to determine a person's future fate. This method can be called the immortal method in the fairy and demon novels. So, when she saw Huziken's sudden change of attitude, she immediately stared at Zhang Fenjai with wide eyes, revealing an extremely shocked look in her eyes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 473. In the front yard of Tongda Pawn Shop. Facing Huziken's respectful salute, Zhang Fenjai, with a slightly raised corner of his mouth, shook his head indifferently. Huziken, from the moment you refused to acknowledge the status of a registered disciple, there was no friendship and relationship between you and me, so you are not qualified to call me senior brother. Senior brother, everything is my fault. I hope you can forgive my momentary offense. Reaching out to open the door of the pickup truck, Huziken knelt on his knees and begged bitterly. Facing Huziken's kneeling begging, Zhang Fenjai turned a blind eye and did not give any reason, but just looked at him indifferently. Big brother, as long as you are willing to forgive my sins and help me resolve the disaster I have encountered, I am willing to give you half of my savings. When Sulixiu heard the conditions proposed by Huziken, she immediately reached out and touched his thigh, with a look of excitement and urging in her eyes. Because Wang Hao often sold antiques and calligraphy privately, he was familiar with the owners of several pawn shops and antique shops in Ningji City, so she had heard of Huziken, the owner of Tongda Pawn Shop. Since the day he entered the antique world, whether it was calligraphy and paintings by celebrities from past dynasties or antique cultural relics unearthed from different periods, Huziken had never made a mistake in his recognition, which not only earned him the nickname of Fiery Eyes and Golden Pupils, but also accumulated a huge fortune. According to Wang Hao's envy and jealous calculation after being drunk, the wealth accumulated by Huziken through antique calligraphy and paintings over the years would definitely not be less than 3 billion. Half of more than 3 billion, that is, 1.5 billion, a huge sum of money. How could this not make Sulixiu, the sister-in-law, feel excited? After holding the jade hand that touched his thigh tightly and glaring at Sulixiu fiercely, Zhang Fenjai said indifferently. Huziken, when I used the spirit sword to cut off the causal relationship between you and the great-grandfather, you were just a traitor in my eyes, and there was only an endless hatred between you and me. So, don't expect me to help you resolve the disaster you encountered, and don't need to continue to ask for conditions in front of me. The identity of a traitor, an endless relationship. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's decisive statement, the pleading look in Huziken's eyes was gradually replaced by resentment. He slowly stood up, then stretched out his hand to pat the dust on his trouser legs, and said with confidence and pride again. As the saying goes, money can make the devil work, and money can also make the devil work. Zhang Fenjai, you think that the little trouble just now can defeat me, dreaming. I can tell you clearly now that the wealth I have accumulated over the years can not only settle all the troubles, but also make a comeback and rebuild my glory. Really? Facing Huziken's regained confidence, Zhang Fenjai sneered and asked back, and seemed to remind him very kindly. Huziken, you'd better check your account now to see if you still have the wealth you have accumulated over the years. When Huziken heard Zhang Fenjai's reminder, which was actually malicious, his face changed slightly. He immediately took out his mobile phone and wanted to check it online, but found that there were more than a dozen unread text messages in his mobile phone, and he hurriedly operated his mobile phone to check. When he found that more than a dozen text messages were all about financial transfer reminders, his face instantly became gloomy and he immediately went online to check his account. In the end, he found that the 7 accounts that stored all his wealth showed a total balance of only 41 yuan. As his breathing suddenly became heavier, he hurriedly called his lover Minling, but the phone was turned off. At this time, there was no need to think too much. He also knew that the lover who was responsible for all his finances not only betrayed him emotionally, but also took away all his savings. At this moment, thinking of the Chamber of Commerce boss Jie who did not receive the 200 million compensation, thinking of the tomb robbers who were arrested by the police, a fear of death that could not be shaken off made him feel completely desperate and fell to the ground again. Master Lu, let's go. Knowing that Huziken was on the verge of collapse and was about to embark on the road of self-destruction, there was no need to wait any longer. So, Zhang Fenjai reached out and patted the pickup driver on the shoulder and whispered. Yes. Although he and Zhang Fenjai had not talked to each other from beginning to end, through the scene that just happened, Master Lu also knew that the thin boy in the back seat was definitely not an ordinary person. Therefore, when facing Zhang Fenjai's order, Master Lu nodded his head and drove the pickup truck away from the pawn shop. Watching the pickup truck slowly driving into the road, Huziken, who could not bear the threat of fear of death, stood up suddenly after the despair in his eyes was gradually replaced by madness. Then, he rushed into a black luxury car with quickened pace and turned the front of the car to catch up with the pickup truck. Not good. Looking at the black luxury car that rushed over recklessly, Master Liu's face suddenly changed and he quickly observed the surrounding environment, hoping to find an area to avoid the collision of the black luxury car. But at this time, Zhang Fenjai's comforting voice came from behind him. Master Lu, don't worry, just continue driving normally. However, as the driver responsible for driving the car, Master Lu did not change his mind about finding a safe area because of Zhang Fenjai's reminder. He still looked around and searched. Boom. But at this moment, he suddenly heard a violent crash behind him. Without any hesitation, he stopped the car on the side of the road and turned his head to look at the sudden situation behind him. The crazy chasing luxury car, because of the sudden tire blowout of the front wheel, directly hit a thick tree on the side of the road, causing the entire front of the car to be completely sunken, and the glass of the front window was completely shattered. At the same time, Huziken, who forgot to fasten his seat belt, crawled on the hood with blood all over his body, motionless and unknown whether he was dead or alive. Master, are you okay? Because the black luxury car appeared at the scene of the car accident, it was only more than 40 meters away from the pawn shop, which made Ding Hui, who had been concerned about Huziken's safety, desperately rush to the side of the black luxury car, and then reached out to touch Huziken crawling on the hood. Huziken, who was motionless at first, suddenly twitched a few times when touched by Ding Hui's fingers, and then slowly raised his head. Master, you must hold on, I'll call an ambulance now. Seeing Huziken's face covered in blood, Ding Hui quickly took out her cell phone and gestured. Xiao Hui, help me down. After shaking his head to stop Ding Hui from calling an ambulance, Huziken ordered with a cold light in his eyes. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 474. Car Accident Scene. Without noticing the cold light flashing in Huziken's eyes, Ding Hui nodded quickly, and then called a male colleague who also rushed over, and worked together to move Huziken down. Leaning against the shriveled front wheel of the luxury car, a feeling of weakness and dizziness as the vitality kept fading away forced Huziken to press hard on the wound on his abdomen, using severe pain to resist the effects of weakness and dizziness. Then, he turned his head and looked at Ding Hui, who was squatting beside him, and a fierce murderous intent gradually emerged in his eyes. If it weren't for Ding Hui's continuous sarcasm and provocation, which led to the tension between him and Zhang Fengjai at the beginning of their meeting, perhaps there would not be a conflict of betrayal of the master later, and Zhang Fengjai would not use swordsmanship to cut off the Zhang family's blessings that protected him, and eventually caused a series of troubles and disasters later. At this time, in Hu Zikan's subconscious, Ding Hui had to bear at least half of the responsibility for all the disasters and pains he was suffering now. At this moment, since it was impossible to retaliate against Zhang Fengjai by means of mutual destruction, Hu Zikan naturally shifted his revenge to Ding Hui. So, while using the pain caused by squeezing the wound to temporarily dispel the effects of weakness and dizziness, Hu Zikan quickly glanced around, then reached out and grasped a sharp branch that was broken by the luxury car. Then, he pretended to be about to tell his last words, and motioned Ding Hui to come closer to his ear. Thinking of the fact that his master had no children or wives in his life, and that the huge wealth and pawn shop he left behind had no one to inherit, Ding Hui, who was filled with infinite desire and expectation, quickly crawled to Hu Zikan's ear. After Ding Hui came over, Hu Zikan aimed at the position of her heart, and then used all his strength to insert the sharp branch directly into her heart. "Master, you..." The pain and suffocation caused by the piercing of the heart made Ding Hui grab the branch with an incredible look in her eyes. Because she couldn't believe that her father's best friend, her most respected elder, her secret master, not only did not give her his legacy, but would kill her instead. Ha. The result of the successful sneak attack made Hu Zikan laugh triumphantly, and he rebuked with a fierce look in his eyes. As the saying goes, heaven's will can be forgiven, but self-inflicted will not be forgiven. Ding Hui, if you hadn't ridiculed, provoked, and humiliated Zhang Fengjai, he wouldn't have been so angry that he would attack me, so your current fate is entirely the result of your own fault. Moreover, your master will not be alone on his way to the underworld. Hu Zikan's rebuke reminded Ding Hui of the time when Zhang Fengjai just entered the hall of the pawn shop. She looked down on his ordinary appearance and shabby clothes, and then sneered and humiliated him, which eventually caused a subsequent conflict. Unintentional regret suddenly emerged in her heart. Through the rear window of the pickup truck, looking at Zhang Fengjai, who turned his head to pay attention to her, she wanted to sincerely say sorry to him. But the boundless darkness that quickly attacked her made her eyes go black and she fell directly to the ground, completely dying. The triumphant laughter, the unstoppable rebuke, and the violent ups and downs of emotions eventually caused the injuries in his body to worsen, which made Hu Zikan unable to help but cough violently. Cough, cough. Accompanied by violent coughs, mouthfuls of blood were coughed out of his mouth one after another. When he saw small pieces of internal organs in the coughed blood, Hu Zikan, who was slightly proficient in medical skills, knew that death had come. So, while he had his last breath left, he turned his head to look at Zhang Fengjai, who was also paying attention to him, and his eyes gradually showed regret. Because at the moment of death, he unexpectedly saw three Taoist masters standing above Zhang Fengjai's head, and knew that Zhang Fengjai and the three elders of the Zhang family were not the liars he thought they were. They were all gods mentioned by the villagers of Zhangchuang. When the regret in his eyes was completely replaced by darkness, Hu Zikan's head tilted, his eyes closed and he died. "Master Lu, let's go." After withdrawing his attention from Hu Zikan and Ding Hui, Zhang Fengjai calmly ordered the pickup driver. Alas! Seeing the regret in Ding Hui's eyes before her death, Sulixiu, who was moved by compassion, couldn't help but sighed and turned around and asked, "Brother-in-law, where are we going next?" "Let's go back to the apartment of Golden Orchid Court first." Originally thought that Hu Zikan, who had a fellow disciple's friendship, could help him secretly deal with the dirty things in his hands and clean up the dirty money after processing. But they didn't expect that the result of their meeting would be like this. Zhang Fengjai didn't know what to do next for a while, so he could only go back to the apartment to think of a solution. Golden Orchid Courtyard. After waving goodbye to the pickup truck driver Master Lu, Zhang Fengjai returned to the apartment with 3 wooden boxes, and then sat on the sofa to think carefully. Whether it was Zheng Bangqiao's bamboo hook or the 7 antiques from the Ming dynasty, they were all priceless treasures, and they were also dirty things that were easy to violate the law. Ordinary pawn shops and antique shops didn't dare to deal with them at all. And the several antique owners who were qualified and capable of handling this batch of dirty things made him very worried about their morals and humanity, which made him frown. Brother-in-law, don't worry anymore. Seeing Zhang Fengjai's brows almost wrinkled into a Chuan shape, Sulixiu, who felt a little distressed, comforted him softly. As the saying goes, there must be a way when the car reaches the mountain, and the boat will naturally straighten when it reaches the bridge. Maybe if you take a good rest, you will naturally think of a way to deal with those antique calligraphy and paintings. That's right. He was eager to deal with the dirty things in his hands in exchange for funds to build a leisure green park. The purpose of building a leisure green park is to change the feng shui pattern of the yin and yang spiritual veins, and then seize the special crystals cultivated in the spiritual veins to complete the incomplete Hunyuan taking heart method. In the final analysis, what he urgently needs now is money. Since it is impossible to deal with the antique calligraphy and paintings in his hands in a short time, the funds for building a leisure green park can be obtained from other places. For example, helping Torch Group deal with the poorly sold Heshuo community, and earn enough commissions to build a leisure green park. Thinking of this, Zhang Fengjai quickly took out his mobile phone, then found Wang Denmiai's number, dialed it and told her to collect and calculate the profits from all sales of Heshuo community to facilitate his subsequent negotiations with Sun Shuxian, chairman of Torch Group. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 475. In the apartment of Golden Orchid Court. After hanging up the phone, he glanced at the screen of his mobile phone and found that the time displayed on the screen was already 6:30 in the afternoon. Thinking of Sulixiu, who had been busy with him all day and couldn't even have a bite of hot rice, Zhang Fengjai, who felt ashamed, quickly got up and made arrangements. Zioxiu, you take a rest first, brother-in-law, I will go to cook for you now. Reaching out and pressing Zhang Fengjai back to the sofa, Sulixiu turned and walked towards the kitchen, smiling and said, Brother-in-law, just sit on the sofa and wait obediently to see how your sister-in-law's cooking skills are. Compared with my sister's cooking skills, there are still a few points. Looking at Sulixiu wearing an apron, it was quite like that, so Zhang Fengjai didn't continue to insist on cooking, and then lay flat on the sofa to rest while continuing to think about other ways to make money. The rest time was not very long, only about 7 or 8 minutes. Along with the sound of cooking in the kitchen, an alluring aroma directly interrupted his thinking. Standing up and walking to the door of the kitchen, Zhang Fengjai looked at the spatula in Sulixiu's white and jade-like palm, as if he was wielding a sharp sword, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. After all, in Sulixiu's introduction, Sulixiu was a very lazy and smart girl, a rebellious girl who did not obey discipline. At this moment, she was completely a qualified good wife and mother. Brother-in-law, please don't look at me like this, otherwise, I will be embarrassed to affect my performance when serving the just fried flavored eggplant to the plate. Sulixiu unexpectedly saw Zhang Fengjai standing at the door of the kitchen, and her face blushed and asked, Alas! I don't know which lucky brat will be able to marry my beautiful, smart and cooking sister-in-law in the future. Looking at Sulixiu's blushing face, like a ripe red apple, a trace of jealousy suddenly emerged in his heart, and Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but sigh when he turned around and left the kitchen door. Sulixiu, whose face became even more red, looked at Zhang Fengjai with a trace of tenderness in her eyes. However, when her eyes followed Zhang Fengjai to the counter next to the sofa, she saw her sister's sweet smile in the photo on the counter, and the tenderness in her eyes was instantly replaced by loneliness, and then she turned around and continued to work. In less than an hour, 5 exquisite and beautiful dishes and a refreshing and delicious seaweed soup were neatly placed on the table. At the same time, Sulixiu also took out 2 bottles of Gangshan Daiku, a specialty of Ningji City, from the bedroom. However, when Zhang Fengjai happily placed the wine glasses and was about to pour the wine, the security door of the apartment suddenly heard the sound of unlocking. Then, Sulitsi, who looked a little tired, walked into the living room with the food she had just ordered from the restaurant. "Zioxiu, is this the meal you made?" Sulitsi asked with a look of surprise when she saw the 6 exquisite delicacies on the coffee table. After all, Zhang Fengjai's cooking skills were terrible except for roasting the flesh of monsters. "Sister, I'm not as lazy and gluttonous as you think." After forcibly adjusting the disappointment in her heart, Sulixiu took the lunch box from Sulitsi's hand, and then couldn't help but complain with her eyes rolled. "Hee hee." After a slightly awkward smile, Sulitsi simply washed up and sat next to Zhang Fengjai, and began to enjoy the delicious food that was far better than her cooking skills. Although they were sisters from the same mother, because of Wang Hao, the relationship between the 2 sisters was slightly alienated, and they didn't know what to say to each other, which made the atmosphere in the living room seem more depressing. Silently eating, silently drinking. In just half an hour, the dinner that was supposed to be lively was over. Afterwards, Sulixiu took the initiative to get up and clean up the leftovers, while Sulitsi went into the kitchen to wash the dishes. Zhang Fengjai, who couldn't stand the silent and depressing atmosphere, got up and washed up, and then returned to the bed in the second bedroom to wait. The waiting time was not very long. Sulitsi, who also washed and bathed, entered the second bedroom wearing a translucent vacuum pajamas, which made Zhang Fengjai impatient and rushed over directly. "Yezi, Zioxiu is here." Sulitsi grabbed the big hand that invaded her private parts tightly and reminded in a low voice. "It's okay, let's be quiet. The arrow is already on the string, how can we give up shooting because of a little concern?" So, Zhang Fengjai shook off the jade hand that grabbed her with a little force, and began to be tender and worth 1,000 gold in the spring night. Sulixiu, who was worried, leaned against the head of the bed and couldn't fall asleep at all, and then looked at her mobile phone boredly. But at this moment, she vaguely heard a familiar panting sound, and she couldn't help but get up and walk to the door of the bedroom, and then put her ear against the door and listened carefully. Heavy panting, suppressed shouting, and violent collisions. As a person who had experienced it, Sulixiu knew very well what Zhang Fengjai and her sister were doing. This made her blush instantly, but she wanted to listen carefully to the battle situation in her heart. She wanted to know the final state of her sister and the final endurance of her brother-in-law. 10 minutes. 30 minutes. 60 minutes. 75 minutes. When the fierce fighting sound came to her ears completely stopped, Sulixiu's eyes showed disbelief, envy, and jealousy. After all, Wang Hao and Zhang Fengjai had 5 times less endurance, and her sister's exhausted begging for mercy was beyond her imagination and cognition. At the same time, the powerlessness and shame that came over her instantly made her return to her bed quickly, and then she picked up her phone to open the online game to divert her attention. After more than 40 minutes of games, Sulixiu completely calmed down her irritability. When she turned off her phone and desk lamp and was about to fall asleep, she heard familiar panting and banging sounds in her ears again, which forced her to continue to open her phone and continue to use the game to divert her attention. It was okay to use the game to divert attention once or twice, but the temptation of 3 or 4 times made her a little unbearable. Finally, when the familiar panting and banging sound came to her ears for the 5th time, Sulixiu, who could no longer bear it, opened her phone and found a very special song, and put the phone directly in front of the door of the second bedroom. "A cup of Urquatu makes me cry." No matter how ugly the male or female roles are, a hero never turns back. If you want to leave, I won't keep you. A forced love won't last too long. It can't stand loneliness. Stop it. When Solitsi heard the song You're So Cruel coming from the bedroom door, she felt extremely ashamed and quickly pushed Zhang Fengjai away. You idiot, I'll marry you off as soon as possible. Zhang Fengjai knew that Solitsi, who felt ashamed in her heart, would definitely not continue to be affectionate with him, which made him very angry and secretly swore. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 476. In the apartment of Golden Orchid Court. It turns out that the person who occupies your heart is not me. I am just in the corner of your heart. No matter how much I give or how much I give you, I still can't change the destined outcome. It was not until the cell phone placed next to the pillow suddenly rang a sweet and deep ringtone that Solixu woke up from her dream. She forced her eyelids to open and glanced at her phone. When she found that the number displayed on the screen was Zhang Fengjai, she quickly swiped her phone and looked at the time. She found that it was already past 11 o'clock in the morning. She quickly raised her head and shouted to the door. There was a sound. Brother-in-law, I'm going to get up right now. The moment she put down her phone and lifted the quilt, Solixu immediately put the quilt back on her face in a panic, her face as red as an apple. Because the sheet she slept on was soaked through, it looked like she had wet the bed. Of course, she knew that with her strong self-control, it was impossible for her to wet the bed like a child. Instead, she had continuous and uncontrollable sexual dreams, which eventually led to such an embarrassing incident. However, thinking of Zhang Fengjai who called to urge her just now, Solixu could only pull off the sheets and hide them under the bed, then took a change of clothes, rushed into the bathroom as quickly as possible, and then locked the glass-tightly door. Seeing Solixu rushing into the bathroom in a panic, Zhang Fengjai had a flash of doubt in his eyes. After secretly shaking his head, he continued to think about the labor fees he should ask for when he met with Sun Shuxian, chairman of Torch Group. Because just half an hour ago, Wang Denmi sent very detailed information via mobile phone text message on the land price, construction materials and labor costs of Heshuo community, as well as the specific price and profit after tax. If we take the sales price when it opened a year ago, after deducting all costs and losses, the high-quality and high-end Heshuo community can bring nearly 1.3 billion in profits to Torch Group. However, taking into account bank loans and unspoken low-price gifts, the final profit can only be about 900 million. Logically speaking, it is not an exaggeration to directly ask for more than half of the profits if the feng shui problem is solved to achieve hot sales and help the Torch Group completely get out of the predicament. But considering the profit-seeking character of the businessman and the series of after-sales services, asking for more than half of the profits seems a bit excessive. At the same time, the construction of leisure and green parks only requires about 300 million yuan, so it seems that there is no need for him to open his mouth. Brother-in-law, what are you thinking about? After carefully washing, bathing and dressing up, and completely removing the remaining traces of her erotic dream, Solixu was finally able to return to normal and leave the bathroom. But when she saw Zhang Fengjai frowning slightly and thinking deeply, she couldn't help but ask curiously. Zhang Fengjai, who was unsure about the profit ratio, quickly told Solixu about his troubles in detail, hoping that she, a professional, could help him make up his mind. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's trouble, she leaned directly against Solixu, who was sitting next to him, to think for a while, then raised her head and looked directly into his eyes and asked. Brother-in-law, are you sure that after solving the feng shui hidden dangers in the Heshuo community, whether it is a high-end building or a luxurious villa, all of them can be sold out in the shortest possible time? Certainly. Zhang Fengjai nodded and confirmed. As long as the feng shui hidden dangers in the Heshuo community are solved, it will not only enhance the impulse of home buyers to make a move, but also change some favorable government development policies. Brother-in-law, what kind of favorable policies are there? Sulixiu, whose eyes immediately flashed with light, asked quickly. I can't figure out what the specific policy will be, but based on the impact of feng shui treasure land on the region, it will definitely be a policy that will help the sales of Heshuo community. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's reply, Sulixiu got up and returned to the bedroom, then returned to the living room with a stack of white paper and pen. Afterwards, she lay down directly on the coffee table and started writing and drawing. Sulixiu, who had written and drawn on more than 20 pieces of paper in one breath, suddenly threw away the carbon pen and asked with expectation in her eyes. Brother-in-law, can you help me find 10 sales ladies with outstanding looks and figures who are proficient in sales in the shortest possible time? It should be okay. After thinking for a while, Zhang Fenjai nodded and replied. The 3 projects launched by Yongsheng Group are all nearing completion. Xia Qingxuan, who met during the Roman holiday, Pan Switting, who is willing to change her destiny through sales, and Ma Ting, who is known as a sales gold medal, have all returned to Xintang building to rest and recuperate. Relying on the friendships made through several special experiences, they can bring their friends and colleagues to help. If that's the case, then we will sign a sales agency contract with Torch Group and let them give the lowest sales price and profit share, and then we will sell the houses in Heshuo community ourselves. Sulixiu stood up suddenly and explained excitedly. If we sell through agents, our final profit will definitely exceed 500 million, and Torch Group will not be dissatisfied afterwards. Although selling as an agent can be tiring and troublesome, the end result is that not only can you get more wealth to accumulate wealth, but you can also help your friends who have a good relationship with you, allowing them to achieve complete financial freedom. Therefore, Zhang Fenjai nodded and agreed to Sulixiu's proposal. Brother-in-law, Wang Hao also wanted to get involved in the real estate industry that could make huge profits, but he was worried about being cheated due to lack of experience, so he opened an agency company in my name to accumulate experience. Let's sign a sales agency contract with Torch Group in the name of the agency company. After getting Zhang Fenjai's nod of agreement, Sulixiu continued to excitedly tell her inner thoughts and plans. In this way, all the money after the sale of the house can be temporarily placed in the bank account of the company. Not only will Torch Group be unable to delay the profit sharing afterwards, but the interest generated by the sales of more than 3 billion yuan will be nearly 50,000 yuan every day. As long as we delay the sales cycle of a few houses, we can get hundreds of thousands of interest out of thin air. Zioxiu, the affairs of Heshuo community are completely handed over to you. Whatever you tell me to do, I will do it obediently. Sulixiu's detailed ideas and plans, as well as her careful considerations and practices, convinced Zhang Fenjai and decided to leave the rest to her. Brother-in-law, let's rush to Torch Building to find Sun Shuxian, and then hurry up to sign the sales agency contract with him. Zhang Fenjai's complete authorization made Sulixiu immediately make arrangements excitedly. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 477. The Torch Building is one of the landmark buildings in Ningji City. After the Chinese capital successfully applied to host the Olympic Games, the Torch Group took advantage of the opportunity to build a comprehensive high-rise building similar to the Olympic Torch, integrating office, leisure, fitness, and entertainment. The moment the Torch Building was built, it also heralded the beginning of the rapid development of the Torch Group, and it was also the start of the life of Sun Shuxian, the chairman of the group. From a small real estate company with annual sales of just over 100 million, it almost became the leading group of real estate in Ningji City in just 8 years. From an unknown real estate developer, in just 8 years, he not only became one of the top richest people in Ningji City, but also became a big shot in the political and business circles. It can be said that the torch building is not only the mascot of the torch group's development process, but also the lucky star that Sun Shuxian can gain a foothold in the political and business circles. After taking a taxi to the torch building and paying the fare to get off, Zhang Fengjai looked up at the 18-story building with a very peculiar shape in front of him, and the shock on his face was gradually replaced by solemnity. At the beginning, after the Chinese capital successfully applied to host the Olympic Games, it specially designed the torch for the Olympic flame. It was created with the creative idea of symbiosis and harmonious integration, and its shape is similar to the traditional Chinese paper scroll. And the torch building. It is a giant torch that is directly enlarged thousands of times. However, the paper scroll is thick at the top and thin at the bottom. It is no problem to use it to build a handheld torch, but if it is used to transform it into a high-rise building, there will be hidden dangers of unstable foundation and insufficient bearing capacity. Therefore, in order to thoroughly lay a solid foundation and increase the strength of bearing capacity, the shape of the torch building is directly turned over and built, and finally formed an inverted torch. The shape of the inverted torch not only completely eliminates the hidden dangers of unstable foundation and insufficient bearing capacity, but also forms a relatively unique foil in the Feng Shui pattern. Using fire as a tray and a straight building as a foundation, it presents a way of gathering wealth by taking millet from the fire. This is also an important reason why the Torch Group was able to almost become the leading real estate enterprise in Ningji City in just a few years, and it is also the key to Sun Shuxian's success as a business tycoon. However, using the Feng Shui pattern of gathering wealth by taking advantage of the fire is actually a very risky move. Because the fortune of the enterprise and the blessing of the helmsman, if the fire cannot be fully suppressed, it is very likely to cause a backlash. And the Feng Shui pattern presented by the torch building now is a spark that is on the verge of getting out of control. Brother-in-law, what's wrong with you? Seeing Zhang Fengjai not only standing there motionless after getting off the car, but also frowning with a serious face, Sulixu couldn't help but ask worriedly. Alas! After withdrawing his gaze from the torch building, Zhang Fengjai sighed and said, "The torch group is in big trouble, and Sun Shuxian may be bankrupt and imprisoned." Brother-in-law, what's going on? The Heshuo community developed by Sun Shuxian and the Torch Group is related to the success or failure of her first business, so Sulixu asked more nervously and worriedly. Zhang Fengjai could also understand the reason why Sulixu was worried, so he told her the impact of the Feng Shui pattern of torch building on Torch Group and Sun Shuxian without any concealment. After hearing Zhang Fengjai's story, Sulixu's emotions gradually became excited, and her eyes gradually showed excitement. Brother-in-law, the negotiation about the agency sales of Heshuo community will be fully handed over to me, and during the negotiation between me and Sun Shuxian, you should try not to interrupt or express your own opinions. Although Sulixu's request was a bit overbearing, her starting point was to earn more sales profits, so Zhang Fengjai nodded without any anger. Then, the two walked towards the automatic revolving door of Torch Building. As the headquarters and facade of Torch Group, the interior decoration of Torch Building is not only luxurious and magnificent, but also the front desk staff responsible for reception are polite and courteous. They did not neglect his ordinary appearance and shabby dress, and there was no contempt or disgust in their eyes. "Sir, I'm really sorry." Faced with Zhang Fengjai's request to meet Sun Shuxian, a beautiful girl with a dignified appearance and outstanding temperament shook her head and explained with a smile on her face. "If you don't make an appointment in advance, you really can't go to see our chairman." "Girl, if we make an appointment now, when can we see Mr. Sun?" The other party's dignified and polite refusal made Zhang Fengjai embarrassed to use a tougher method to force his way in. He could only follow the rules set by the other party and plan to use the method of making an appointment in advance to meet Sun Shuxian. "Sir, I'm really sorry." After quickly flipping through the notebook she carried with her, the girl continued to smile and shook her head and explained. "In the past half month, our chairman's schedule has been full, and your appointment may be scheduled for half a month later. After hearing the other party's reply, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help frowning. Because in half a month, he can completely use the means of disguise to go to the provincial capital to dispose of the batch of dirty things in batches, and there is no need to obtain funds for the construction of leisure green parks through the sales of the agent Heshuo community. What's more, with his impatient personality, it is impossible for him to waste half a month in vain. Just when Zhang Fengjai was considering whether he should force his way into the building to meet Sun Shuxian or get money by dealing with dirty things, 4 capable bodyguards in black suits and a majestic middle-aged man in casual clothes suddenly walked out of the elevator on the left side of the hall. "Brother-in-law, look," Sulixu immediately reminded excitedly in a low voice when she saw the middle-aged man's appearance. Sun Shuxian. When Zhang Fengjai saw the middle-aged man walking quickly, a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. He put his hands behind his back and greeted him calmly. "Hello, Mr. Sun." When he heard the greeting from his ear, Sun Shuxian subconsciously turned his head and looked at him, then a trace of surprise flashed across his face and he shouted out loud, "Zhang Fengjai." Then, the look of surprise on his face was instantly replaced by joy, and Sun Shuxian quickened his pace and walked towards Zhang Fengjai, responding in a very enthusiastic tone. "No wonder I saw a magpie flying overhead when I left the house this morning. It turns out that a distinguished guest is coming today." In fact, the reason why Sun Shuxian's attitude seemed so enthusiastic was entirely because of the various mysterious methods that Zhang Fengjai displayed at Shen Shuhao's funeral. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 478. In Torch Building. At the speed of whirlwind, he injured Chen Yunhan's bodyguard and forcibly changed the direction of the pistol in the hands of the Lu family members. With a keen eye, he captured Shang Shinayu alive and resolved the crisis of the Gu insect-devouring peak in southern Xinjiang. Using the sharp sword that appeared out of thin air, he completely suppressed Shang Shinayu's terrifying momentum and finally forced Lu Xiaotian to give up the original shares of Yongsheng Group. At Shen Chengao's funeral, Zhang Fengjai showed all kinds of superpowers, which made the knowledgeable Sun Shuxian know that he was not an ordinary person, but also a strong man that he could not afford to offend. What's more, Zhang Fengjai's protection of Shen Loxi at the funeral and the tenderness in Shen Loxi's eyes when she looked at him were enough to prove the relationship between the two lovers. With the dilemma and troubles that Torch Group is facing now, facing the increasingly powerful Yongsheng Group with stronger strength and influence, he did not underestimate Zhang Fengjai's confidence and qualifications. "Mr. Sun, you're welcome." After bowing and saying politely, Zhang Fengjai glanced at the 4 bodyguards behind him and asked with a slightly frown. "Mr. Sun, are you going out?" "Yes, I'm going to meet a friend who is interested in investing in real estate." Sun Shuxian nodded and explained without any concealment. Then, he asked with a puzzled look in his eyes. "Mr. Zhang, I wonder why you came here today." "To help you solve the sales problem of Heshuo community," Zhang Fengjai also answered directly. "Mr. Zhang, why don't you follow me to the office upstairs to discuss in detail?" After the doubt in his eyes was instantly replaced by surprise, Sun Shuxian immediately invited excitedly. "That's what I meant. Mr. Zhang, please." "Mr. Sun, please first." Looking at the chairman with a flattering smile on his face, who took the initiative to lag behind the young man by half a shoulder, a girl at the front desk who was slightly thin but looked extremely pure asked with a puzzled look. "Sister Han Han, whether it's his appearance or his temperament, the young man is just an ordinary worker. Why is our chairman so respectful and enthusiastic to him?" Ting Ting, as a receptionist at the front desk, you must always remember one sentence, that is, you can't judge a person by his appearance, and you can't measure the sea by a bucket. Faced with the innocent girl's question, the beautiful and dignified girl put away the professional smile on her face, and then solemnly warned. "Some people have a flamboyant personality and like to do things in a high-profile manner, giving people a very strong feeling. In fact, the other party is just a soft commodity with a strong appearance and a weak heart. Some people have an introverted personality and like to do things in a low-key manner, giving people a weak and ordinary feeling. In fact, the other party is likely to be a strong person that even the chairman can't provoke. So, when facing a high-profile person, we don't need to flatter the other party with a high-profile look. When facing a low-profile person, we must not look down on the other party and offend the other party. Sister Han Han, thank you for your teachings just now. I will pay attention in the future, the girl called Ting Ting thanked and promised with a grateful look. After nodding in response to Ting Ting's thanks, the girl called Han Han looked at Zhang Fenjai, who walked into the elevator with a complicated look in her eyes. Judging from the luxurious decoration of the lobby on the first floor of Torch Building, Sun Shuxian is a person who pays great attention to appearance, so the office used to receive guests is decorated in an even more luxurious style. In the nearly 700 square meters of office, there are independent tea and billiard areas for leisure, equipment areas and sauna areas for fitness, restaurant areas and box areas for enjoyment, as well as an artificial lawn and pond for relaxing the mind. Brother-in-law, this is the life of the rich. Looking at the multifunctional luxurious office in front of her, Sulixu exclaimed with envy in her eyes. Zioxu, then you can take advantage of the opportunity of the Heshuo Community Agency sales, work hard to become a top rich man, and then go all out to build your own imagined luxurious office. Zhang Fenjai, who did not change his mood at all because of the high standard decoration in front of him, smiled and encouraged. I will. After nodding vigorously, Sulixu took the initiative to step forward and said, Chairman, I want to be the agent for the sales of your Heshuo community, including 13 high-rise boutique buildings, 35 independent luxury villas, 365 independent parking spaces, and 60 street-side shops. After hearing Sulixu's request, especially the detailed investigation of Heshuo community, Sun Shuxian frowned slightly and looked at Zhang Fenjai. In response, Zhang Fenjai chose to follow Sulixu's instructions in advance, ignored Sun Shuxian's puzzled eyes, walked to the front of the leather sofa and sat down. Chairman, anyway, your Heshuo community's houses, villas, and shops have not been sold for a long time. If they continue to be empty, it will not only occupy more of your funds, but also have a bad impact on your group. After seeing Zhang Fenjai, who had given her the right to negotiate, chose to let go completely, Sulixu, who suddenly felt nervous, took a deep breath, and then tried to keep her face and tone calm while negotiating. Zhang Fenjai's indifference and Sulixu's calmness made Sun Shuxian vaguely guess their plan, so he turned around and sat back in the boss chair and reminded them with a smile. Miss Su, for Mr. Jiang's sake, I am not afraid of making a fool of myself and telling you the truth. Since the completion and opening of Heshuo community, only 7 high-rise units have been sold, and only 2 villas with independent gates and courtyards have been sold. As for the shops and parking spaces along the street, they are all stuck in our hands. In addition to our group sales department, we have also hired 2 professional companies to act as sales agents, and the results are also not ideal. So, Ms. Su is still willing to continue to take over Heshuo community, which is known as the most deceptive hot potato in Ningji City. I do. After nodding vigorously, Sulixu said with a firm look. Chairman, the home agency company I founded is willing to take over the hot potato of Heshuo community. Sun Shuxian did not immediately nod and agree because of Sulixu's firm attitude. He reminded her with a cunning smile like an old fox on his face. Ms. Su, because the 2 sales agents used the real estate in Heshuo community for mortgage loans, our group lost more than 10 million yuan. So, in order to avoid being deceived and suffering losses, you need to pay a certain amount of deposit in advance. How much? Sulixu asked nervously. Minimum 30 million, Sun Shuxian replied with 3 fingers raised. Due to Wang Hao's selfishness and precautions, as well as her excessive trust, she didn't save any money in the past 2 years. So, whether to agree to Sun Shuxian's request to pay the deposit, Solixia could only ask Zhang Fengjai for his opinion. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 479. Torch Group, in the President's Office. Based on the Feng Shui geographical advantages of Heshuo community, as well as the absolutely conscientious design and quality, we only need to solve the three-legged golden toad that affects the Feng Shui pattern. Then, in as little as 3 days and as long as 7 days, all the houses in the community can be sold out, and the money can be collected in the shortest time. Therefore, facing Sulixiu's look for advice, Zhang Fengjai directly took out his mobile phone to contact Zhu Zhenjun, and after confirming that Zhu Zhenjun could immediately come up with a deposit of 30 million, he nodded to Sulixiu. After receiving Zhang Fengjai's nod of agreement, Sulixiu quickly regained her confidence. While smiling and nodding in agreement, she also made her own request. Chairman, I can agree to your request for a 30 million deposit, but I hope you can also give in on the low sales price and profit sharing ratio. No problem. After agreeing to Sulixiu's request with the same smile, Sun Shuxian also made his request. However, in view of the delay in the performance of the first 2 agency companies, I can only sell you as an agent for 1 month. Considering the sales capital of more than 3 billion and the huge interest generated every day, Sulixiu shook her head and started to bargain. Chairman, the sales cycle of a real estate project can be as short as 4 or 5 months, or as long as more than a year. There is only 1 month of agency sales time. Isn't your request a bit excessive? So, how long do you want? Sun Shuxian asked with a smile without caring at all. 2 months, please give me 2 months, Sulixiu asked, holding out 2 fingers. Okay. After nodding in agreement without any hesitation, Sun Shuxian picked up the phone on his desk and asked his secretary to notify the heads of the sales department, finance office, and legal department to come over. Ms. Su, apart from the 30 million deposit and the 2-month sales cycle, you can directly discuss the remaining specific agency sales details with my subordinates. In response, Sulixiu nodded without caring at all. When Sulixiu and the 5 heads of the sales department, finance office, and legal department began to discuss and negotiate the specific details, Sun Shuxian stood up and walked to Zhang Fengjai, then invited with a smile. Mr. Zhang, would you like to have a chat in the tea room? Okay. After nodding and getting up, Zhang Fengjai sat cross-legged on the soft and comfortable carpet in the tea area, and then asked directly with an indifferent expression. Mr. Sun, have you encountered a lot of trouble in the past year or so? How is that possible? Sun Shuxian, who was concentrating on making tea, suddenly paused in his hand movements, and then retorted with a forced smile. Torch Group is a large enterprise with annual sales of over 10 billion, and I, Sun Shuxian, have connections all over the political and business circles. Even if I encounter trouble, I will be able to resolve it. Faced with Sun Shuxian's tough argument, Zhang Fengjai reminded him with a slightly raised corner of his mouth. Mr. Sun, even the top Feng Shui masters will not be able to easily resolve the situation that is about to replace the pattern of chestnuts in the fire. Sun Shuxian, whose expression suddenly changed, suddenly raised his head and looked at Zhang Fengjai, with a look of horror in his eyes. When we decided to build the Torch building, we had the idea of taking advantage of the Imperial Capital Olympics, but the real decision to build it came from a top Feng Shui master from Xiangjiang who came up with a Feng Shui layout that could help the company develop rapidly, which is what Zhang Fengjai just said. Mentioned chestnuts from the fire. From the moment the Torch building was officially completed, whether it was participating in the land auction, troubles encountered during the development process, or difficulties encountered in the later sales process, he was able to turn danger into disaster at the most critical moment. It is also one of the important reasons for the rapid development of torch group. However, this good luck suddenly failed during the development of Heshuo community. Not only could it not easily resolve 3 major accidents during the construction process, but it was also unable to change the sluggish sales situation. If there is a problem with just one property in Heshuo community, with the contacts and wealth he has accumulated over the years, it will not have much impact on the group. But the next 2 properties not only experienced the same sluggish sales situation, but also several important contacts he had made in the political circles were either transferred away due to promotions or suddenly fell ill and retired. This made him vaguely feel that the feng shui of the torch building had appeared. Question. Therefore, he spent a whopping 50 million 6 months ago to hire the top feng shui master who provided the chestnut from fire feng shui pattern. Although the top feng shui master confirmed that the troubles he encountered during this period were related to the changes in the feng shui pattern of taking chestnuts from the fire, he was unable to change the impact of the sparking fire pattern on luck. At this time, how could Sun Shuxian not feel panic when he heard Zhang Fengjai accurately point out that it was impossible for ordinary people to know about the feng shui changes that he regarded as top secrets? At this moment, the panic has affected my psychology, and I can't continue to make tea calmly. In desperation, Sun Shuxian could only turn his head and shout loudly at the office door. Yaling. Then, a peerless beauty with the appearance of a moonshine woman, a devilishly hot figure, and a seductive aura all over her body opened the wooden door and walked in. Not only had the Yuanyin long been lost, but there was still a trace of Sun Shuxian's unique essence on her body, indicating that the woman named Yaling in front of her was not only Sun Shuxian's personal secretary, but also his life secretary, which made Zhang Fengjai lose interest in continuing to pay attention to her. Make tea for Mr. Zhang. After pointing to the tea set in front of him and giving the order, Sun Shuxian lowered his head and began to adjust his mood. Yaling was very surprised that she, the nominal secretary and actual lover, was asked to make tea in person, and she couldn't help but look at Zhang Fengjai. Ordinary appearance, shabby and cheap clothes. When she saw that the thin boy who needed to make tea for her was just an ordinary worker, Yaling couldn't help but frown, and a look of disgust flashed in her eyes. So, she not only secretly replaced the precious top-grade Dahongbao with cheap green tea, but also poured it directly into the teacup without waiting for the tea leaves to soak. Looking at the tea in front of him that was no different from boiled water, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he stood up and walked to the wine cabinet standing next to the box, and then picked a bottle of 20-year-old Zumian Deque. Seeing the thin boy who was hated by her dared to use the famous wine worth tens of thousands of yuan privately, Yaling was about to stand up to stop him, and Sun Shuxian, who had adjusted his state, suddenly raised his head. When Sun Shuxian looked up and saw that Zhang Fengjai did not stay in the tea area to taste the top Dahongbao, but went to drink the strong liquor, his eyes revealed a puzzled look. Then, he subconsciously lowered his head to take a look at the tea that Yaling brewed by herself. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 480. Torch Group, in the President's Office. Dahongbao, one of China's top 10 famous teas, will take on an orange-yellow color after brewing and exude a long-lasting and attractive orchid aroma. But what about the tea in the cup in front of you? Not only was it clear and transparent without any color, but it also did not emit the slightest hint of orchid fragrance. There was no need to think too much, let alone ask too many questions. Sun Shuxian could also guess that the snobbish Yaling must have despised Zhang Fengjai's shabby appearance and deliberately used boiled water to fool and humiliate him. Thinking that Zhang Fengjai had just taken the initiative to mention the feng shui pattern of taking chestnuts from the fire and catching fire to start a prairie fire, and recalling the mysterious method he showed at Shen Zhenggao's funeral, Sun Shuxian secretly guessed that he might have a way to resolve the hidden dangers of catching fire to start a prairie fire feng shui. Therefore, while adjusting the panic just now, I had already thought of a specific plan to ask him to take action. But Yaling's deliberate use of boiled water to fool and humiliate Zhang Fengjai completely failed the plan he had just considered. The anger that suddenly emerged in his heart made him reach for the teapot lid and intend to pour the boiled water directly on Yaling. However, when he saw cheap green tea leaves floating in the teapot, his anger was instantly replaced by murder. If serving boiled water is considered a form of neglect and humiliation, then replacing it with cheap green tea is a slap in the face to Chi Kuokyo, which is tantamount to directly turning against Zhang Fengjai, and completely intending to kill him. Bang! Pa! Suddenly throwing the lid of the teapot on the coffee table, Sun Shuxian grabbed Yaling's hair with one hand, aimed at her white and smooth face with one hand, and fanned her hard. Whether it was the sound of the teapot lid breaking or the loud slap in the face, Sulixu and others, who were discussing the details of the agency sales, turned their heads and looked around in shock. Zhang Fengjai just looked at it with an indifferent expression, took out a transparent glass from the wine cabinet, then opened the bottle and slowly poured the white wine. Shu Xian, you, why did you hit me? After trying hard to break away from the hand holding her hair, Yaling covered her burning face and asked with disbelief in her eyes. Why did I hit you? Sun Shuxian stood up slowly. After asking a question with a gloomy face, he raised his leg and kicked Yaling hard on the shoulder. He knocked her to the ground and said in a sinister tone. If it weren't for the protection of national laws, I would be eager to kill you right now. Why? Faced with the undisguised murderous intent in Sun Shuxian's eyes, Yaling asked even more puzzled. Because Mr. Zhang is still a master with vast supernatural powers. He is an immortal god that ordinary people like us need to kneel down and worship. He is a savior who can help me resolve the disaster. After first offering a series of free flattery, Sun Shuxian used the corner of his sight to quietly observe Zhang Fengjai and found that his expression did not change at all. He could not help but feel worried and continued to scold. Facing Mr. Zhang, who exists like a god, not only do you have no respect for him, but you also dare to use cheap tea to humiliate him. Even if I kill you now, it will not eliminate the fear and self-blame in my heart. Just him. Pointing at Zhang Fengjai, who was slowly tasting high-quality liquor, Yaling's eyes showed an unacceptable look. Regardless of his ordinary appearance or shabby dress, the thin young man in front of him neither has the aloofness of an outsider nor the dazzling grace of a god. How could he be the savior? Sun Shuxian said. Whether it was Sun Shuxian's deliberate flattery or Yaling's unacceptable doubts, Zhang Fengjai's face did not change as he sat cross-legged in front of the coffee table again, and then warned indifferently. Mr. Sun, according to your own fortune and business luck, you can at least suppress the feng shui pattern of taking chestnuts from the fire and ensure that there will be no big changes in 5 to 7 years. But the enchanting and charming bones devour your blessings, and the greed of relatives destroys the foundation of the company. In the end, the feng shui pattern of taking chestnuts from the fire gradually evolves into a fire that starts a prairie fire. If you allow the power of a spark to start a prairie fire to develop and grow, it could take as short as 3 months or as long as 5 months, and you will definitely be ruined and trapped in a desperate situation, and you will be trapped in prison for the rest of your life. Enchanting and charming bones, greedy desires of relatives. After hearing the key information mentioned in Zhang Fengjai's warning just now, Sun Shuxian also sat cross-legged in front of the coffee table again, silently falling into deep thought. As a personal secretary, although Yaling's work ability is relatively average, his performance in that aspect can be said to be charming, which makes him feel like a spring night is short and the day is high, and he has been a king ever since. Not early infatuation. Looking back on the time when I broke through the intimacy relationship with Yaling, it seems that it was the day before the accident in Heshuo community, which coincided with the enchanting and charming bones that devoured my blessings. At the same time, it was also because of their close relationship that one of Yaling's brothers and several cousins from the same family were able to join the management of Torch Group. Problems arose in several of the properties they were responsible for, which also happened to destroy the foundation of the company. The greedy desires of the relatives. When he realized that the root cause of all the troubles he was encountering was the woman around him, Sun Shuxian's eyes when he looked at Yaling suddenly showed strong fear and disgust, which also made Yaling suddenly tense. After retracting his glare at Yaling, Sun Shuxian stood up and returned to his desk, then took out a special bank card from his briefcase. After sitting cross-legged on the coffee table again, Sun Shuxian placed the bank card in front of Zhang Fengjai, and then asked respectfully. Mr. Zhang, for the 60 million hard work, I hope you can point out a clear path for Shuxian. 60 million in hard work. Seeing Sun Shuxian give away 60 million without any distress, Yaling looked at the bank card and suddenly showed strong envy and jealousy. Because every time she served Sun Shuxian wholeheartedly, the benefits she could get afterwards were only 10,000 to 20,000 yuan at most, which was nothing compared to the huge sum of 60 million yuan. After looking at the bank card with an indifferent expression, Zhang Fengjai reached out to pick up the wine glass without saying anything, and then tasted it slowly. This also made Sun Shuxian immediately realize that the sincerity he just took out was not enough, so he quickly started drinking again. Expressed his stance. Mr. Zhang, this 60 million is just the information fee. I will pay you 3 times the hard-earned fee. 3 times 60 million is a sky-high price of 180 million. If the information fee of 60 million is included, then the total amount Zhang Fengjai will eventually receive will reach 240 million.